I, like so many others, owe an apology to Taylor Swift. Sort of. Look, before we dive into Folklore, let's first look at how we got here and what made this album such a shock to fans and critics alike. Which, yes, unfortunately means we have to talk about Reputation.
Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do.
Back in 2017, Taylor Swift dropped her sixth studio album, Reputation, to a resounding outbreak of laughter from the general music listening public. Sure, the album may have its defenders, but it's clear the general narrative around the album would have most believe that, despite the commercial success, this could have been the final nail in the coffin for Swift's career as one of the most influential pop stars in the world. Two successful albums on, it may be hard to remember this, but at the time people were talking about this album in the same regards as Paula or Van Halen 3 or maybe most notably 03 or 4. And quite honestly, the reaction was justified. Reputation is the opposite of what makes Taylor Swift great and is the peak of every misstep she's made in her career that has prevented her from having an album fans and critics can agree on start to finish. Of course, Swift proved the critics wrong by following Reputation up with yet another successful, if not more disposable album, with 2019's Lover.
I promise that you'll never find another like me.
The first two singles from Lover showcased a hard left turn away from the harsh sound of the previous album into almost Katy Perry levels of bubblegum. However, the album itself actually showcased many of Swift's strengths as a songwriter, with many of the tracks stripping away the gimmicks. Lover is a pretty good album that never quite reaches full potential, as the artist in question is still clinging on to her pop star persona. Like many people, Lover made me question what a return to a more stripped back sound would be like for a modern day Taylor Swift.
I knew you playing hide and seek and giving me a weekend's eye.
Okay, let's get into the album itself and clear a couple of things up. Many articles have been written about how this is Taylor's first alternative album, and well, yes, back when Taylor was releasing stuff like this.
I'm never, ever, ever getting back together.
This would have been a little left of the dial, but in today's strange pop climate where Powerful's Deathbed can be one of the biggest hits of the year, Folklore isn't all that out of place. I don't mean that as a bad thing, however. This move into more introspective and challenging era of pop is genuinely exciting to me, and it's really cool to see such an established artist lead the way into injecting more indie influence into the Hot 100. This album switches between feeling like a Lana Del Rey record into a mid-era Tegan and Sara album when they were just starting their transition to straight up pop. This is both a positive and a negative for Folklore. After all, comparing any artist to Tegan and Sara or Lana Del Rey is a huge compliment. But then again, at points this album did make me think of how great the last Lana Del Rey record was, and kind of gave me the temptation to revisit that instead. Luckily, despite the similarities in sound and tone on certain tracks, this album has a real trick up its sleeve to keep you invested. And it's a really simple one. The storytelling and lyricism on this album is incredible. Within hours, people were already posing theories and interpretations of what the lyrics on this album could mean. Songs like Cardigan, August, or my personal favourite Betty all tell very emotional stories that are dripped in metaphor and require multiple listens to really attempt to unpack each subtle detail. Theme-wise, this doesn't venture too far from Swift's usual comfort zone, with the album dealing heavily in themes of relationships, nostalgia, and most prominently heartbreak. All subjects she handles brilliantly, making this album feel brutally honest and very heartfelt. I have two more specific things to mention, as both caught me off guard. First of all, who would have expected that a collaboration between Bon Iver and Taylor Swift would work so well? And secondly, the entirety of Betty, as mentioned before, this is my favourite song on the album and quite possibly my favourite song Swift has ever released. The finger-picked acoustic guitar matched with that amazing harmonica really make this song stand out with a soundscape I would never have imagined I was going to hear on a modern Taylor Swift album. All in all, the hype is certainly justified here. Sure, some tracks may feel a little similar to other artists at points, but reminding me of other great albums definitely isn't much of a flaw, especially not one worth talking points over. So I honestly can't believe I'm saying this, but Folklore by Taylor Swift gets a perfect 10 out of 10. That felt weird. 2020 has been a weird year, guys. A really weird year.